Diego Morales leaned against the balcony railing of the Miami resort, the ocean breeze carrying the promise of a perfect week. At 38, he'd carved out a rare break from his software engineering job in Orlando, where he spent his days debugging code and his evenings coaching his son Lucas's soccer team. This trip was for his family. His wife, Sophia, a nurse who'd been buried under hospital shifts, and their boys, Lucas, 12, and Mateo, 10. Months of planning had gone into this escape, and Diego felt a quiet pride as he watched the boys race toward the pool, their laughter echoing across the sunlit deck. Sophia, lounging nearby with a book, had picked this resort, her eyes lighting up when she found it online. Diego trusted her excitement. It felt like a chance to reconnect, to hit pause on their hectic lives. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo, Lucas mid-cannonball, Mateo waving from the shallow end, Sophia smiling over her paperback. Diego posted it to his workgroup chat with a caption, "Living the dream." His colleagues flooded the thread with thumbs-up emojis and jealous quips. For once, Diego wasn't the guy staying late to fix a server crash. He was a dad, a husband, a man who'd earned this moment. The first day unfolded like a postcard. Diego and the boys built a sandcastle, its lopsided towers drawing giggles from Mateo. Sophia joined them for a walk along the beach, her hand brushing Diego's as they dodged waves. But as they returned to the resort for dinner, something shifted. Sophia paused near the lobby, her gaze locking onto a man in a blue t-shirt by the bar. "I think I know him," she said, her voice curious but steady. "From a nursing conference in Chicago, years ago." The man noticed her, flashed a wide grin, and approached. "Sophia? No way," he said, his tone warm, almost too familiar. He introduced himself as Javier Ruiz, a sales rep for a medical equipment company. "Small world, huh?" he added, shaking Diego's hand with a firm grip. Diego nodded politely, but a flicker of unease stirred. Javier was charismatic, his laugh easy, his stories polished. He knelt to talk to Lucas and Mateo, offering tips for the resort's arcade games, which won them over instantly. Sophia laughed at a shared memory from the conference, something about a keynote speaker tripping on stage. Diego stayed quiet, his mind snagging on the coincidence. A random run-in, thousands of miles from home. He pushed the thought aside. Sophia was his rock, the woman who'd stayed up with him through late-night coding sessions, who'd cheered at Lucas's first goal. Doubt felt like a betrayal of its own. Dinner was lively, with Mateo recounting his arcade victories and Lucas begging to hit the water park tomorrow. Sophia seemed lighter, her usual hospital stress replaced by a playful energy. Diego joined in, teasing the boys about their sandcastles' structural flaws. But as they walked back to their room, Javier appeared again, this time with a drink in hand, offering to show the boys the resort's game room. "You guys should come too," he said to Diego and Sophia, his smile inviting. Diego declined, citing an early morning. Sophia hesitated, then agreed to let the boys go for a quick game. "I'll keep an eye on them," she said, following Javier and the kids. Diego returned to the room alone, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. He scrolled through his phone, checking work emails out of habit, but his thoughts kept drifting to Javier's easy familiarity. It was nothing, he told himself. Just a friendly guy from Sophia's past. Still, he couldn't shake the image of her laugh, the way it lingered a beat too long. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for his family to return, unaware that this perfect day was the last he'd ever trust. Diego Morales sat at the swim-up bar, the Miami sun beating down as he sipped a soda, watching his son splash in the resort pool. Lucas, 12, was perfecting his dive, while Mateo, 10, clung to a float, giggling as he bobbed. Sophia, his wife, lounged on a chair nearby, her attention split between the boys and her phone. Diego tried to focus on the moment, his first real vacation in years, a break from coding deadlines and soccer practices. But the unease from last night lingered, sparked by Sophia's encounter with Javier Ruiz, the overly friendly medical sales rep she'd recognized in the lobby. This morning, Diego had woken early, his mind replaying Javier's easy charm, the way Sophia's laugh had carried a hint of something unfamiliar. He'd brushed it off, joining the boys for breakfast, where Mateo spilled syrup on his shirt and Lucas begged for another arcade trip. Sophia had been her usual self, organizing towels and sunscreen, but Diego noticed her glance toward the pool area, scanning the crowd. He told himself it was nothing, just a husband's paranoia creeping in. Now, as he leaned against the bar, Diego's eyes drifted to Sophia. She'd moved to a lounge chair closer to the water, her phone set aside. Javier appeared, striding across the deck with a confident gait, and settled beside her. They talked, their heads close, Sophia's laughter ringing out. Diego's grip tightened on his glass. Lucas was busy with a pool game, and Mateo was engrossed in his float. Neither noticed their mom's animated conversation. Diego forced himself to stay calm, reasoning that a chat didn't mean anything. But the sight of Javier leaning in, pointing at something in the distance, made his stomach twist. That afternoon, the family hit the water park. Diego threw himself into the boys' excitement, racing them down slides and cheering as Mateo braved a steep drop. Sophia joined in, but her energy seemed distracted, her eyes darting to her phone between rides. At one point, Diego caught her typing quickly, a faint smile crossing her lips before she tucked the phone away. He asked if everything was okay, and she nodded, blaming work messages. Diego let it go, not wanting to sour the day. That night, after the boys crashed in their room, Sophia said she needed air and stepped out for a walk. Diego, restless, decided to follow at a distance, telling himself he just needed to stretch his legs. The resort's paths were quiet, lit by soft streetlights. As he rounded a corner near the parking lot, he froze. Sophia stood by a pillar, wrapped in Javier's arms, their lips locked in a kiss that was anything but casual. Diego stepped back, his heart pounding, the world tilting. He retreated to their room, slipping into bed, his mind a storm of disbelief and rage. When Sophia returned, she moved with practiced ease, setting her bag down, brushing her teeth, and sliding under the covers. "You awake?" she whispered, but Diego stayed still, his breathing forced into a slow rhythm. She sighed and turned away. Diego lay there, eyes burning, replaying the kiss, the laughter, the lies. He'd trusted her for 13 years, built a life around her and the boys. Now, every memory felt tainted. The next morning, Sophia acted as if nothing had changed, suggesting a beach day with the kids. Diego mumbled agreement, his voice flat. While she took the boys to the pool, he stayed behind, his hands trembling as he picked up her phone from the nightstand. He'd never snooped before, but instinct drove him now. A folder labeled Work Docs caught his eye, locked with a password. He tried Lucas's birthday, and it opened. Inside were messages with Javier, dozens of them, stretching back months. "Can't wait for Miami," one read. "Perfect excuse to see you." Another, from Sophia, Diego's clueless. "We'll have time." The words hit like a punch. Their chance meeting was planned, a lie orchestrated weeks ago. Diego's hands shook as he scrolled, each message a new cut. Sophia called Javier her escape, complained about Diego's predictable routines, and hinted at other trips where they'd met in secret. He copied the messages to a flash drive, his movements mechanical, his mind racing. This wasn't just a fling, it was a betrayal woven into the fabric of their marriage. As Sophia's laughter echoed from the pool outside, Diego made a choice. He wouldn't confront her yet. He'd gather proof, protect himself, and unravel the truth, no matter how deep it went. Diego Morales sat alone in the Miami resort room, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound breaking the silence. The boys, Lucas and Mateo, were at the arcade with Sophia, their laughter a distant memory from yesterday's carefree moments. Diego's discovery of Sophia's secret messages with Javier Ruiz had shattered his trust, but the weight of what he'd seen, the kiss, the planned deception, pushed him to dig deeper. His hands steadied as he picked up Sophia's phone again, the screen glowing with the Work Docs folder he'd unlocked using Lucas's birthday. What he found next would unravel the life he thought he knew. Diego scrolled past the messages with Javier, his heart racing as he opened a subfolder labeled Personal. Inside were screenshots of texts with another name, Dr. Carlos Vega, a surgeon Sophia worked with at the Orlando hospital. The messages dated back 4 years, around the time Mateo was born. One read, "Those nights at the clinic made me feel alive again," with Sophia replying, "You're my secret strength." Diego's breath caught. The intimacy wasn't just emotional. Photos showed Sophia and Carlos at a medical conference in Atlanta, their arms linked, dated during a weekend she claimed was for work. Another message hinted at a hotel stay, with Carlos joking, "Mateo's got my eyes, doesn't he?" Diego froze, the implication slicing through him. He kept digging, driven by a need for truth. A Google Drive link in the folder led to a hidden archive, locked with Mateo's birthday. Inside, Diego found a bombshell, a photo of Sophia with her ex-fiancé, Brandon Lopez, taken 9 months before Lucas's birth. The caption read, "You were always the one." Diego's mind raced back to that time. Sophia's sudden trip to a nursing seminar in Tampa, her distance when she returned. He studied Lucas's features in his memory, the shape of his jaw, the tilt of his smile, now seeing Brandon's shadow in them. The realization hit. Neither boy might be his. Diego's hands trembled as he copied every file, messages, photos, even a voice note of Sophia laughing with Carlos, to a flash drive. He encrypted the data, his software engineering instincts kicking in, ensuring no one could access it but him. He needed evidence, not just for closure, but for what came next. He called his lawyer, Elena Carter, a no-nonsense attorney who'd handled his home purchase years ago. "I need you now," he said, voice low. "It's urgent." They set a meeting for when he returned to Orlando. Back at the resort, Diego played the part of a devoted dad. He joined Lucas and Mateo for a beach volleyball game, forcing smiles as Sophia watched from a distance, chatting with Javier again. Her ease, her casual glances at her phone, felt like a performance now. Diego kept his rage buried, focusing on the boys' joy. That night, Sophia suggested a family dinner, but Diego claimed a headache, staying behind. Alone, he reviewed the evidence again, each message a confirmation of a parallel life Sophia had built. One text to Javier stood out. "Diego's too busy with work to notice. We're safe." The words burned, her confidence in his obliviousness a deeper wound than the affair itself. The next morning, Diego suggested cutting the trip short, citing a work emergency. Sophia protested, saying the boys deserved their vacation, but Diego was firm. "I need to handle this," he said, his tone final. The drive back to Orlando was tense, Lucas and Mateo dozing in the back seat, while Sophia scrolled her phone, typing quick messages. Diego gripped the wheel, his mind mapping out his next steps. He'd confront her, but not yet. First, he needed legal leverage. At home, Diego moved into the guest room, claiming insomnia. Sophia asked if he was okay, her voice laced with concern, but her eyes darted away. Diego nodded, keeping his responses short. He met with Elena Carter the next day, laying out the evidence, the messages, the photos, the timeline of Sophia's affairs. "I want paternity tests for both boys," he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. Elena's brow furrowed as she reviewed the files. "This is airtight," she said, "but it'll be brutal, especially for the kids." Diego nodded. "I need the truth, whatever it costs." Diego returned home, his resolve hardening. He watched Sophia prepare dinner, joking with Lucas about his volleyball skills, helping Mateo with homework. Her normalcy was a facade, but Diego saw through it now. He wasn't just a betrayed husband. He was a man reclaiming his reality. The test would confirm his suspicions, but the deeper battle was already won. He knew the truth, and he'd fight for justice, no matter how painful. Diego Morales drove through Orlando's morning traffic, his hands steady on the wheel despite the storm inside him. The flash drive in his pocket held the truth about Sophia's affairs with Javier Ruiz, Dr. Carlos Vega, and her ex-fiancé, Brandon Lopez. Evidence that neither Lucas nor Mateo, the boys he'd raised as his own, might be his biologically. Back home, Diego kept up the facade of normalcy, but the guest room had become his sanctuary, a place to plan without Sophia's probing eyes. He'd met with his lawyer, Elena Carter, and demanded paternity tests, setting the stage for a reckoning. Now, he prepared to dismantle the life built on lies. Sophia noticed the shift. At breakfast, she asked why Diego was so quiet, her tone light, but edged with unease. He shrugged, saying work was intense, and turned his attention to Lucas and Mateo, helping them pack for school. Lucas, 12, talked about a science project, while Mateo, 10, begged for a new video game. Diego's heart ached. He loved them fiercely, but the doubt about their paternity gnawed at him. He dropped them off at school, his smile masking the turmoil, and headed to a coffee shop to finalize his strategy with Elena. Elena laid out the plan: file for divorce, request paternity tests, and pursue a civil lawsuit for intentional emotional distress. "The evidence is overwhelming," she said, flipping through the screenshots of Sophia's messages. "The court will see you were deceived." Diego nodded, his jaw tight. He didn't want revenge. He wanted justice, a clean break from the betrayal. Elena warned that the process would be grueling, especially for the boys, but Diego was resolute. "They deserve the truth, even if it hurts," he said. Back home, Diego moved methodically. He gathered financial records, mortgage documents, and bank statements, storing copies in a locked briefcase. Sophia spent the day at the hospital, texting Diego about a late shift. He used the time to search her laptop, finding a hidden email account linked to Javier. One email confirmed a future meetup in Dallas, with Sofia writing, "I need this." Diego's too caught up in his routine. The casual dismissal fueled Diego's resolve. He saved the email, adding it to his growing arsenal. That evening, after the boys were in bed, Diego handed Sofia an envelope. She opened it, her eyes scanning the divorce papers, and froze. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp. Diego stood firm, his gaze unwavering. "I know about Javier, and Carlos, and Brandon." Sofia's face paled, but she laughed, a nervous edge to it. "You're overreacting. We can talk this out. The boys need us." Diego shook his head, pointing to the papers. "This is just the start. I know everything." He walked away, leaving her clutching the envelope, her protests fading into silence. The next days were tense. Sofia sent long texts, pleading for a chance to explain, claiming the affairs were mistakes born of stress. Diego didn't respond. He moved into a small apartment near his office, telling the boys he needed space for work. Lucas asked if he was mad, and Mateo clung to his arm, confused. Diego hugged them tightly, promising to explain soon, but the words stuck in his throat. He couldn't shatter their world yet. The legal process accelerated. Elena filed the divorce petition and requested paternity tests, citing Sofia's documented deception. Sofia's lawyer pushed back, arguing the tests would harm the boys, but the judge, reviewing Diego's evidence, approved them. The results came weeks later, delivered in a sealed envelope during a court hearing. Diego sat, hands clasped, as the judge read the findings. Neither Lucas nor Mateo was his biological son. Sofia gasped, tears streaming, but Diego felt a strange calm. The truth was out, undeniable. Sofia's composure cracked in court. "You're punishing me," she shouted, her lawyer urging her to sit. Diego remained stoic, his evidence, messages, photos, emails, laid bare before the judge. The court granted the divorce, awarding Diego half their assets, including the house and savings. Elena then filed the civil lawsuit, citing years of deliberate lies. The judge, swayed by the meticulous proof, ruled in Diego's favor, ordering Sofia to pay substantial damages for emotional distress. As Diego left the courtroom, Sofia tried to approach, her eyes red. "The boys love you," she whispered. Diego paused, then walked away. The victory was hollow. The family he'd known was gone. But with each step, he felt lighter, unburdened by the lies. He'd lost a marriage, but gained clarity. The next fight was rebuilding, not for revenge, but for himself. Diego Morales stood outside his new apartment in Orlando, the keys to his leased pickup truck jingling in his hand. The divorce was finalized. The paternity tests had confirmed that Lucas and Mateo were not his biological sons, and the civil lawsuit against Sofia for intentional emotional distress had ended with a substantial settlement. The courtroom victory had secured half of their shared assets and financial compensation, but it couldn't erase the ache of a shattered family. Diego had walked away from the life he'd known, choosing distance from the boys to shield himself from further pain. Now, at 38, he faced the task of rebuilding from the ground up. The apartment was small but functional, a place to reset. Diego threw himself into his software engineering work, leading a project to optimize a local hospital's patient database. Late nights at the office replaced family dinners, and weekend runs along Lake Eola became his therapy. He started sessions with a counselor, a habit from his military days, to process the betrayal. The therapist urged him to confront his grief, not just for Sofia's lies, but for the bond with Lucas and Mateo, now severed. Diego didn't call or visit them. The truth, exposed in court, had made any connection too raw, too confusing for everyone. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. Diego declined invitations to socialize, preferring solitary coding projects or rebuilding old computers as a side hustle. But in late 2023, a contract with a local high school changed things. He was tasked with upgrading their network for a digital literacy program. At a planning meeting, he met Elena Rivera, a 35-year-old literature teacher coordinating the project. Their conversation started strictly professional, discussing bandwidth needs and software compatibility, but Elena's sharp insights and dry humor caught Diego's attention. She emailed him precise updates, always signing off with a quote from a novel. One evening, at a school event to launch the program, Diego and Elena ended up debating Steinbeck's East of Eden over coffee. She shared that she was raising her 10-year-old son, Noah, alone after a divorce from a husband who'd prioritized his career over family. Diego opened up about his own loss, carefully avoiding details but admitting the pain of starting over. Elena listened without judgment, her quiet nod a kind of understanding he hadn't felt in years. Their talks grew frequent, moving from emails to weekend coffee runs, always with Noah tagging along, asking Diego about coding or comic books. By mid-2024, Diego and Elena were dating, their connection built on mutual respect. Noah warmed to Diego, challenging him to video game duels and showing him sketches of superheroes. Diego found himself laughing again, the weight of the past easing. One night, Elena arrived at his apartment with a small box. Inside was a pregnancy test, positive. She watched him closely, saying, "I know this is big. Take your time." Diego stared at the test, his throat tight. It wasn't fear. It was hope, a chance he thought he'd lost forever. He pulled her into a hug, his voice breaking as he said, "I'm in." They planned together, deliberate and open. Diego researched pediatricians, attended every ultrasound, and built a crib by hand, each screw a step towards something new. When Mia was born in early 2025, Diego held her first, her tiny fingers curling around his. The hospital room was quiet, Elena resting, and Diego felt a certainty he hadn't known since before the betrayal. Mia was his daughter, no doubts, no secrets. He whispered her name, promising to be the father he'd always wanted to be. The months that followed were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and late-night walks to soothe Mia's cries. Noah, now 11, took to being a big brother, proudly showing Diego how to swaddle the baby. Diego and Elena moved into a modest house, pooling their savings for a fresh start. He took on freelance coding gigs to work from home, balancing Mia's naps with client calls. At night, with Mia asleep on his chest, Diego reflected on the past. Sophia's deception had torn his world apart, but it had also led him here, to a family built on trust. Diego never heard from Sophia again. The boys, now teenagers, were a painful memory, but he hoped they'd understand one day. His love for them hadn't faded, but staying away was his way of protecting them from further hurt. With Mia, Noah, and Elena, Diego found peace. He didn't need to prove his worth or unravel hidden truths. His daughter's steady breaths, Noah's laughter, and Elena's quiet presence were enough. For the first time, Diego lived a story that was his own, written in moments of unshakable truth.